it's funny because I really didn't expect to do this. That's what's so funny about all of this, is that I really didn't expect to lead this movement in a way. But there was also always a part of me that deeply wanted to. I just didn't know what that would be and what it would look like. And that's okay. That's okay. So it's been an evolving process, an evolving creative process in this movement as I lead this.
This is Rebel Therapist, a podcast for entrepreneurs who are trained as therapists and who want to level up their businesses, make a bigger impact, feel fulfilled, and be very well paid. I'm your host, Annie Schusler. This week, I'm talking to April Harter, an entrepreneur and therapist in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Listen as we talk about how she's built an anti-racism coaching program and how her work is becoming a movement. As you'll hear, April is a true rebel therapist, a leader, and an innovator. You'll hear one half of our conversation today, and you'll hear the other half next week. Welcome, April. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
It's the first episode where we are actually called Rebel Therapist. And so it's absolutely perfect that you're here. So I want to talk to you all about your entrepreneurial journey of the past year. And a ton has been going on with you. So can you tell us about your business and what you get paid for?
All right. Thanks again for having me. I love to be here. It's really exciting. It's fun to be a rebel. It's a lot of fun. Well, what I do right now is I'm an anti-racism coach, and I work online, 100% online. And I primarily work with white women who are feminists, and they have a deep desire to be truly intersectional. In order to do that, they need to actually work on their own racism. So I teach them how to go about doing that.
And tell us about what makes your program different. What makes your program unique in the way that it works and what it focuses on?
Well, what makes my program unique is the fact that, well, it's not the same old anti-racism stuff, right? So, like I said, I love being on this podcast because we're talking about the rebel therapist. So I'm a therapist. I'm an anti-racism coach, and I'm doing things very, very differently. And what makes it different is the fact that, well, this gets into what I talk about in a little bit in my coaching about the 3 steps of anti-racism. So what I do is an intervention. And that's what's very different compared to what has been done before. Because what has been done before in anti-racism work is awareness, which has a lot to do with education, like learning, reading books, maybe going to some workshops, some things like that. But with an intervention, you really learn to examine feelings and how feelings are connected to racism. And so that's what really is so incredibly different. In fact, to my knowledge, what I'm doing has never been done before in anti-racism, period.
Mm-hmm. And full disclosure, you are my anti-racism coach. And absolutely, from my experience, there really isn't anything like it that I've experienced. And that there's just a real depth to what we're doing.
Yeah, there is. And I think that so much of that comes from the fact that, because I am a psychotherapist, that background in psychology, I think it really lends itself to that depth. Whereas a lot of the other people who do anti-racism, and that's another thing that's different, is that many of them don't have a background in psychology. And we can read a lot about psychology and understand psychology, but it's another thing to actually sit with someone in the midst of change and to have witnessed that and to be a part of that. And that's something I feel we're very fortunate as therapists, social workers, and other people who work within the field of psychotherapy.
And I'm imagining that you're thinking about things like knowing how to deal with countertransference, like knowing how to deal with what people are throwing at you.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Countertransference is one of those things that I talk a lot about on Instagram. Mm-hmm. I'm on Instagram a lot. It's a really good platform for me. And for those that are like, oh, Instagram. So it's, you'll learn more at the end of this, how to find me and whatnot. But on Instagram, what I do is I teach a lot of the anti-racism educators as well as potential clients or people who have watched some of these influencers on Instagram with anti-racism that, they have thousands upon thousands of followers, right? But something that I see on Instagram too is that issue of countertransference, which is like, other anti-racism educators and coaches and consultants that end up really, especially if they're POC like me, they haven't processed their own racial trauma. And the reason I know that is because not only am I a survivor of racial trauma, right? Because I also have helped POC in my practice to heal from racial trauma. So I'm very familiar with racial battle fatigue and what it looks like. So there's a lot of that going on when it comes to anti-racism. So I feel like as a psychotherapist, I'm able to see the countertransference because that's something that I was taught to do, to do and process my own trauma so that I'm not harming others. And so I am unfortunately seeing a lot of that harm happen from these educators. And some of them are aware of it and some are not. Some are open to it and receptive to getting the healing that they need to get. Like I said, and some are not. It just depends on the influencer. But the point is that they wield a lot of power with that being an Instagram influencer. And so when you have that kind of a platform, and then let's say you're lashing out, let's say you're a POC anti-racism educator, and you're lashing out in anger because you can't help it. You need some healing to do. You've been through hell. You've been through racism. You know what I mean? And then a white person triggers you, right? Triggers that PTSD, that racial trauma, right? Then it's like it interrupts the educational process. So there's a big difference between, okay, you've got a role as an educator, and that carries certain responsibilities and I think duties. And I think we need to improve the standard in that regard within this field that I'm in, this anti-racism education, coaching, and consulting, as something that needs to happen. And I think that as a psychotherapist and all in that regard, we are licensed and expected to have ethical standards. So when it comes to coaching, I think I also bring that background to the coaching of ethics. And right now, when it comes to the anti-racism, the education, the coaching and whatnot, hate to say it, but it's kind of like the Wild Wild West on Instagram right now. Mm-hmm. Kind of all over the place. And so there's no foundation. There's no standards. It's just kind of everybody got their pistols going. I can't help it. I'm from Texas, they kind of got their pistols going. And there's no consistent foundation and professional standards. So I come from that background of professional standards and then bringing that into this profession. So it's exciting because what I'm noticing and what I feel, and like I said, it's so exciting, is that I'm contributing to a very fresh field, and we're building those professional standards. And with my background, I'm really challenging a lot of these other anti-racism educators and coaches and consultants to really be thinking about the ethics in the way that you're teaching these white people about racism. Are you lashing out at them? Maybe do you need to go get help? So it's not to insult, because I've been there. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just really important. It's just ethical and responsible to do that.
And whenever you talk about this, I get this feeling like I know that you're a leader in this movement, like that you are in fact leading a movement of doing work in this unique way. Can you tell us about how you see that potentially growing, how you see potentially even beyond you delivering the coaching yourself?
That is a very good question. And that is absolutely true. And, before I even get into it, Annie, and for the listeners, it's funny because I really didn't expect to do this. That's what's so funny about all of this, is that I really didn't expect to lead this movement in a way. But there was also always a part of me that deeply wanted to. I just didn't know what that would be and what it would look like. And that's okay. Mm-hmm. That's okay. So it's been an evolving process, an evolving creative process in this movement as I lead this. And as far as leadership goes, I've always been a leader in my heart. From as far as I can remember, I felt it in my heart. And I feel that a big part of where I lead is being a really good problem solver and to see where there is something missing in something. And in this, I saw that there was a missing element connected to emotion. And where I also lead is how racism is a behavior. And that's something that has not been looked at. And as far as the future, and we've talked about this, Annie, and I've told some of the other people that follow my work, which is that the end goal is that it needs to go beyond me, because how can the world heal from racism if I'm the only one coaching? Right now I'm a one-woman show, but the reality is that I kind of sat there thinking, I want to leave a legacy before I die. That's the truth. Some people, mortality, but it's the truth. Like, I really, really want to leave a legacy before I die. When I die, how will people remember me? What kind of difference did I make in this world before I die? I became a social worker to do big things. And so this is all connected to leadership, because as a social worker, I worked in the medical field, and then I had private practice, and all throughout that, I did feel that I was making a difference, but not on a mass scale. Mm-hmm. And I always wanted to make a big difference on a mass scale. And doing this business has provided me that opportunity to be able to do that work on a mass scale, something that I never thought would happen, because when you graduate, you go, I'm going to make a difference. I'm a social worker. I'm a change agent. Then you go into the world, you're like, oh, I got to get a job. And then I do my job. And you're making a difference little by little. But now it's like, whoa, I'm gearing up to write 7 books over the course of 14 years. And how that connects to the movement is those books are going to be so crucial, because those books are going to help white people when they read it. It's going to be self-help fiction, which is in and of itself very rebellious and very outside the box. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. People are like, what's that? What's self-help fiction? And self-help fiction is what it is. You read it. It's kind of like parables or like folk stories. Like you read, it's like moral of the story. You're reading these stories and you're like, whoa, you're learning something. So these books that I'm writing are meant to kind of really to give white people in the world hope to face the racism that maybe they're afraid to look at within themselves. But if they read the story, they can connect to it. And then at the back of the book, and this is where it's going to get really awesome, at the back of the book, there's going to be a link where white people, if they want to, they have the choice. They have a chance. They have an opportunity to go to a directory where there are a bunch of anti-racism coaches that I've certified, and it just catches fire. I mean, that's the goal. Is I imagine my books in Barnes & Noble in this whole series, and people, they go to the self-help aisle and they're like, you know what? I got issues with racism. And how do I do that? Because right now, you go to the self-help aisle and there is no book about, for a white person, how do you stop your racism? There is no such thing. And I want to change that. You go to this aisle, go to self-care, self-help aisle, and then you read this book. It's riveting. It's inspiring. It moves your heart to the point where you're like, I think I want to change. I think I want to deal with some things I've never dealt with. But where do I get the help? And then you go to that directory. So it's pivotal, these two things, these books that I'm publishing and the coaches that I'm going to be certifying.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah. Tell us about that. How soon, and I know you might not even know this yet, but how soon do you think you'll start training other coaches?
Good question. So I'll make a confessional since Annie made her confession. For those who don't already know, Annie's also my coach, So that's like, we have a very interesting relationship, right? We've coached each other. And so it's wonderful. And so in that sense, Annie and I have talked about this, like, what are we going to do? Or what am I going to do? And at first I thought, I'm going to publish the first book. and then I'm going to start certifying. But what I'm starting to see is like, I think I'm going to do it sooner than later. Probably because the book I want to come out at a minimum by spring of 2020. It's very likely to come out before then because it's not going to be a super long book. My books are not going to be super long. They're going to be it's going to be easy read in the sense of it's not going to be super academic. A lot of what I do is very academic, but these are not going to be academic in that regard. So I want to publish by spring of 2020, but I'm beginning to think, Annie, that I may start doing the certification maybe 6 months before that.
I love it. I love it.
So instead of waiting until my second book to put that stuff out, I might actually have the directory listing in the first book.
Mm-hmm. Because people are already asking you for it. People are already asking you, to teach them your method.
They are coming to me because it's kind of like, they're like, whoa, this makes so much sense. And like, how do I learn how to do that?
Mm-hmm. And what does it look like right now? Right now you're doing an individual coaching program. You're about to do a group coaching program. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I started out like right now I'm doing the beta, the beta launch started on November the 6th, which was the same day that I had my first webinar. That was fun. Doing webinar. That was so cool. And I'm still doing it, obviously. I do webinars every month, to teach. And that's my version of awareness within the 3 steps of anti-racism. And I do the individual, and that lasts 7 weeks long. And there are 4 coachings, right? And then I got the group program coming up. Ooh, and before I even get to the group, that's right. Currently, I'm in open enrollment. So open enrollment started on November the 6th.
Well, so this comes out on January 1st. So I think open enrollment just closed, right?
Oh yeah, open enrollment did just close. That's right. I always get the dates all mixed up. So that's right. So group enrollment starts January the 1st.
Awesome.
And that's going to continue until February the 11th. And then the week of February the 18th is when the group program starts. So that's going to be exciting, running a group. It's going to be fun. And the group's going to be 7 weeks long. And basically, unlike the individual that I did last year, where I had 4 coachings, the group is really special because it's a coaching every single week. Because in the individual, it's like every other week, whereas with the group program, it's weekly. And it's so powerful because white folks are not going to be alone in this. They're going to have buddies. They're going to have friends that they can do their homework with and get to know each other. They can learn from one another. It's just, there's a lot of power, a lot of transformational power in working with a group. I have personally experienced that working, in your coaching group, Annie, the 2 that I've been a part of, the superpower method as well as the scale, the rebel therapist mastermind, in the scale group. And yeah, that's what inspired me to do the group too. Just, working with you and me also personally going through the transformation of working in a group. So I understand the power of a group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that you, even just in your webinars, which I know is different because the people aren't as invested yet, some of them, and it's free. It's not a commitment yet when they show up, but still seeing how you create this safety and you create this feeling of learning and where you're just dropping these very powerful ideas and then you're there for people, helping them think through it. So I can only imagine what it's going to be like when it's with a small group of people who are really invested.
Absolutely. I think it will be very powerful. And yeah, like the webinars, technically, exactly. I'm in a group.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that in those webinars, when people, for those that, subscribe to these monthly webinars, one does learn a lot looking at each other, in these webinars. In other words, maybe they're not in an actual physical room, but online they're looking at one another. And yeah, people just, again, it's validating. It's very validating. And I try to normalize that it's okay to make mistakes. Because the other thing that tends to happen a lot is that a lot of white people are taught, well, it's kind of contradictory, Annie. It's like, this is how I see it. If you're going to go learn something and transform, you're going to make mistakes. But because of the fact that we've had other anti-racism educators who essentially kind of slap, proverbial slap on the wrist. They kind of slap white people on the wrist when they act out in unconsciously racist ways. And so it's like, the thing is I'm not saying, oh yeah, just carte blanche be racist. But much of racism is unconscious. And that's what I teach in my system. And so it's expected in the coaching, and I expect in the webinars for there to be unconscious racism happening. And so one has to learn how to deal with that. And that's what I do in my coaching. Like, how do you see that unconscious racism that really you don't see, that isn't like KKK variety style racism, Because really, in reality, Annie, the majority of racism that happens in America, it really is unconscious, and people really, really don't see it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that gives me a lot of compassion. And that's one of the biggest reasons why, I don't get upset at white people, because I know that they can't help it. They really can't help it, And so, we can't stop what we can't see. So I help white people see what they can't see, so that they can learn to change and to effectively stop the cycle of racism within themselves. And it extends to their families too. It stops the cycle of racism intergenerationally within their families, their white families. That's huge. That's epic. I love what I do.
It's so epic.
Yeah. I know. I'm just sitting here sometimes I don't even believe what I do. Sometimes I'm like, am I really doing this? Am I really changing the world? Am I really it's just so rewarding, Annie.
Yeah.
It's so much fun and rewarding.
So as you step into all of this, as you've been stepping into all of this, what has happened to your therapy practice?
Well, what's happened in my therapy practice is that it's shrunk. Like I said, I didn't expect this. It was like my therapy practice was doing all right, but there was something missing. And what was missing was, I think, the degree of passion that I feel right now in what I'm doing. So I loved what I was doing. I loved practicing therapy. But like I said, I wanted to make a difference on a really big scale. So right now, I have just a few therapy clients, and I'm not taking any more therapy clients. Again, that's not something I expected. I went to school, got this master's degree in social work, got my clinical license, started up my private practice. I thought, oh yeah, I did everything that I was told to do to be stable and be comfortable and all this other stuff. And then I was like, well, I'm not as happy as I could be. And there was this little whisper in my ear, I want to do more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I want to do more. I don't know what that is, but I want to do more. That's what that moment was like before I started doing coaching.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that's so amazing about you, is that you trusted that whisper. You followed it and you allowed it to happen. That you didn't just say, no, that's too big. That's too much. You followed it.
I did. But I'm not even going to sit here and say it wasn't scary though.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I followed it. See, that it's a catch-22. I followed, but I was also afraid of the unknown. What's going to happen? I'm doing something so different. It's never been done before, ever. No therapist has done what I've done before. I had no one to look to say, oh, that person's done that before, so I know everything's going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
and that's, I think, the part that was scary. And that, I think, is very integral to leadership, which is you're going to be often doing things that have never been done before, especially when you're innovating. And that's, I think, the key difference with another thing that's different with me and a lot of other leaders is that, you really take it up another notch when you're innovating and you're inventing things. Because I'm not just a rebel, I'm an inventor. And I always wanted, Annie, when I was a kid, I've never told you this, but when I was a kid, I wanted to be an inventor. And now I am. It's amazing. I just never thought, I always think when we think of inventors, we think of Bill Gates, we think of we think of other things. We think of tech, we think of machines, but I became an inventor of a system to stop racism. I mean, that's exciting. So that's the difference in my leadership, is that I had to create my own thing. And now I have to lead it because I know this is what I need to do. And now I have to step it up. So I had to build something from scratch. And now I'm executing this huge plan.
Yes.
So yes. Being an innovator is extremely rewarding, but also a little lonely. It's a little lonely because you're doing it all on your own. And you do have to have, and I'm not even going to say I'm not going to sugarcoat this. You got to have the guts to do it on your own. You got to have the guts to say, okay, I want to do something, and I gotta like sit here and figure it out.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, compared to, I mean, even starting a therapy practice is hard. Figuring out your niche, figuring out how you want to do it, how you want to be uniquely you, that's hard. But being an entrepreneur without that kind of default mode of private practice and really inventing what you want your life to look like, what you want your business to look like, how you want to serve people, how you want to reach people, figuring all of that out can be really lonely. Partly because other people in your life are not going to be looking at you and thinking like, yep, this is great. Some people in your life, even very well-meaning, loving people, are going to be like, what the hell are you doing? Like, this is not secure. I don't see other people doing this. Like, even for me, stepping into business coaching, my mother, God love her, was like, well, do people pay other people to do this? Like, is this a good idea? So,
I laugh because I can relate to that so deeply. Because then you get I joke, you get the stank guy, Annie. You get the stank guy. Like, what are you doing?
What are you doing?
Like, you're crazy. Yeah, I get that more often than people realize. They think, oh, April, what you're doing is so amazing. But what you don't know is behind the scenes, actually, a lot of people are going, I'm kind of a bad scientist. I'm inventing things, and like people are like, we're not familiar with that. So Annie, I think another element of this has to do with embracing what is foreign.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're the one creating this stuff, you are birthing something that is foreign. And things that are foreign are usually not comfortable to people. But what's cool, and what I've learned coaching with you, is that that's an important part of business. How do you market something that is so foreign? Most people don't, but at the same time, there's a desire there from white people to stop the racism. So it's a combination of something that is foreign, but also something that is needed in society. So again, filling in that gap. I think that that's just so important as an entrepreneur to do that.
Yeah, I love how you said that. And we're going to leave it there for now. And we'll get even deeper in the second half of this conversation, which you'll hear next week. If you're stepping into a different role like April did, this program might be for you. Rebel Therapist Mastermind is a small group coaching experience with me and some of your most motivated and inspired peers. We're taking our last applications for this round on Thursday, January 31st, 2019. So go ahead and get on the wait list now. Rebel Therapist Mastermind guides you through the whole process of leveling up your business and doing more with your superpowers. We help you identify what your offer will be, whether it's going to be a therapy center, a book, a podcast, an online course, a workshop, or something else. Then we go through the entire process of creating and testing your idea, adjusting it along the way, creating your bold and unique message, and delivering it to your people. In stage 1, you'll fill out a questionnaire to get clear on where you are now, what your vision is, what you want that vision to accomplish, what you already know, and what you still need to learn. Then in stage 2, you and the other Rebel Therapist participants meet with me for 3 6-hour days to do the work. We lean into your vision, identify and refine your project, and work on your message and your marketing plan. And this all happens online. Then in stage 3, you meet with me and the other participants monthly for the next 8 months over online video calls. You'll be doing the work, getting feedback between sessions, and staying on track along the way. It's a full 9-month program because even after those 3 days of solid work, you need to keep on working on this and working through the mindset issues to really make it happen. Learn more about Rebel Therapist Mastermind and get on the wait list at rebeltherapist.me/mastermind. Again, that's rebeltherapist.me/mastermind. I'll see you next week.